Hey everybody, how y'all doing this morning? Just in the office, working on some fish at the moment lake map breakdowns this morning, and I'm going to take a little break here and do today's YouTube video. And today and tomorrow, I'm going to do the videos on what I think are the three most overrated lakes in the country, and what are the three most underrated lakes in the country. And obviously today, I'm going to talk about what I think are the three most overrated lakes in this country today. Probably going to ruffle some feathers, but that's okay because one of the lakes on my list is also one of my sentimental favorite lakes of all time to fish. So I'm talking about one of my lakes that I like as well. But I've had a chance to fish over most all the famous lakes in the country. I've been really fortunate over the past 35 years to be able to see and fish firsthand many of these lakes multiple times, different times of the year, different seasons. And on top of that, I've paid attention to other tournaments that have went on throughout the years. So I've sort of got a pretty good handle on what I feel makes a good lake or what makes a lake overrated. So gonna get into it. I'll start. I'll go 3, 2, 1. I'll start with what I think the number third is, second, first. And my choice right off the bat for the third most overrated lake in the country is Grand Lake in Oklahoma. Now, this, like I said, this is my sentimental favorite. My mom and dad, I grew up in Joplin, which is only about, a 35 minute drive from the Elk River Arm. And my mom and dad had a trailer house on the lake for like 30 years. So I spent every weekend on the lake for well over 30 years, plus fishing tons and tons of tournaments on it. I've got thousands of days on Grand Lake, thousands of days. It's sentimental lake. I've got so many good memories growing up about there. Ever since I was 10 or 12 years old, all through my teen years. Fishing down there every weekend, saving up enough money to drive down to the lake and put money in my 14-foot flat bottom, run it around on Grand. So I've got a lot of good memories about Grand Lake. But in saying that, I want to include that in the fact that it is one of the most overrated lakes in the country. It didn't used to be like that. And right off the bat, I'll say the biggest thing that there's a couple different things, but the biggest thing that has hurt Grand Lake is the high level of tournament fishing pressure. Ever since the city put in that Wolf Creek ramp on Grand Lake, it's had an influx of big tournaments, tons of tournaments. You've had the Bassmasters Classic there a couple years. It's just gotten hammered every single weekend. You've got these major, huge, like 400 boat tournaments on the lake. And it has taken a toll on Grand Lake without a doubt. It's not the same lake it was back when I used to fish the lake super heavily back in the early 80s. It's simply not. You don't have the habitat there. A lot of the habitat has been ripped out by shoreline development. We've lost probably 75% of the willow and buckbrush population that was in the lake back when it was in its heyday, but through overdevelopment. The lake has had a tremendous amount of pollution inflowed into it. The poultry plants and some of the other industries that have polluted the lake have basically just gotten slapped on the hand, and they've continued to pollute the lake. So there's been some water quality issues in it, and all this type of stuff. So you've got the pollution, the loss of habitat, the heavy fishing pressure has all taken a toll on the lake. And don't get me wrong, there's still quality fish in Lake, and there's still big strings to be caught on Grand Lake. But for the amount of attention that it has received nationally, and you always see Grand Lake is way up on the list of one of the best lakes in the country, and it's really not. Grand Lake is a difficult lake to fish. There's a lot of dead water on it. So many of the key areas on Grand Lake are either covered up by boat docks, or they're offshore by locals that have put man-made brush piles in it, which sort of creates a situation where every tournament you have at Grand Lake, you've got a top-heavy field. If you look, and this is what I classify what I think is a good lake or not. A good lake is where, if you look at tournament results, the people that finish in the bottom 25 also catch good bags. But if you look at a lake and you see these big giant strings, like mid 20 strings or whatever, to win the tournament, and then you got the bottom 25% of the tournament catching one or two fish, that's a top heavy lake. And that's sort of the way Grand Lake is right now. If you look at most of the tournament results on Grand Lake, there'll be some decent bags at the top, but then the weights drop way off. And you get down to that bottom 25%, and it's pretty sad to see what a lot of the weights are on there. So from that standpoint, Grand Lake is the third most overrated lake in the country for me. But I still love it. Like I said, I've got a lot of great memories about Grand. I'll still fish it a lot, still do instructional trips down there. It'll always be one of my favorite lakes because I had so many good memories, about that lake growing up when I was a kid. So next one, number 2 most overrated lake in the country is Lake Pickwick, in my opinion. Lake Pickwick is another lake that has gotten really exploited by bass tournaments. They've got a really good facility down there on Pickwick. It attracts a lot of national, regional, and local stuff. Gets a lot of attention there. But the reason that I think Pickwick is an overrated fishery is the fact that most of the tournaments that they have there, it seems like everybody wants to go to Pickwick in the post spawn. And what you have on Pickwick and in a lot of the other TVA lakes, I would include a lot of the TVA lakes as some of the most overrated lakes in the country, because when you have these tournaments there in the post spawn, everybody winds up fishing on top of everybody in these community holes. And if you're there at the right time and you happen to get an early draw, or you happen to get one of those community holes where it's not getting a lot of pressure, you'll occasionally see these really big bags of fish getting caught, these mid to upper 20-pound bags. And then again, everybody else struggles. The weights drop way off from there. So Pickwick is one of those lakes, one of those top heavy lakes again, that you don't have. There's not a lot of options to win on that lake. If depending upon the time of the year, you can scrounge out a check fishing shallow, or fishing up in the tail races, or just fishing around odds and ends stuff, and you can get a check. But most of the tournaments get won in Pickwick on offshore shell beds, drops, subtle stuff like that. Where the locals have a really big advantage on that lake. And from that standpoint, I think it's pretty much overrated on that. Pickwick to me is like it's a typical TVA impoundment in that sense, where it's a lake where locals have a really big advantage, because a lot of the stuff when you got this subtle offshore cover that exists, it makes it really difficult a lot of times for people that come in from the outside to compete against that. So again, Pickwick, number 2 most overrated lake in the country, in my opinion. Not to say that these aren't good lakes. There's quality fish in these lakes, and there's a lot of fish in it. But when you look in comparison to a lot of other lakes, as far as the opportunities that exist for anglers, these lakes that I'm telling you about sort of rate down a little bit lower on that. Okay, my number 1 most overrated lake in the country. And this is probably going to make some people that guide on the lake, a little bit irritated, but I fished it quite a bit, so I can say this, is Lake Fork in Texas. Lake Fork in Texas is arguably one of the most famous lakes in the country, and it puts out giant bags of fish. There's no doubt. It's Texas state records out of Lake Fork. You see 30-pound bags caught there all the time. Any tournament they got there, if you watch it, they catch them really good. But if you've ever been to Lake Fork, it's another one of those top heavy lakes. It's one of those lakes where, just look at the recent Bassmaster event they had at Lake Fork, the one where Patrick Walters blew everyone away with the live scope. Look down in that tournament at the bottom 25% what they caught. It was bad. I mean, it was like 4, 5, 6 pounds, something like that, of the Elite Series guys. And to me, that is indicative on what qualifies a lake as an overrated lake, as far as the whole field not catching them. The whole, you got a top heavy um, tournament field, almost every single tournament on these particular lakes. Lake Fork is another one of those lakes. It can be hard to fish. There's a lot of dead water on it. You've got to key on just the right thing to catch those big bags of fish. It's not like you can just go down the bank or fish obvious stuff, unless the fish are bedding or something like that. Most of the time it's at some really obscure, off the wall, little niche type deal that produces those big bags of fish. And and again, I'm not saying Lake Fork is not a good lake, because it's an excellent lake, but for the amount of publicity the lake gets as being this super famous, awesome bass fishery, it's just not. If you go, so many people, so many of my friends, back when Lake Fork was, just getting started and it was hot, it was its heyday, I had so many of my buddies that went down there from Joplin, they wanted to go to Lake Fork because they heard so much about it. Every one of them came back disappointed. They go, man, that place was terrible. We didn't catch nothing down there. I've heard that over and over again. So Lake Fork, for the people that know how to fish it and know what they're doing and hit on the right thing, it can be a phenomenal fishery. But for the average dude that goes down there, you're probably going to struggle more times than not, which makes it overrated fishery in my opinion. So anyway, that's my 3: Grand Lake, Pickwick Lake, Lake Fork. My opinion, the 3 most overrated lakes in the country. Don't want to ruffle any feathers on this because they are good lakes. I'm not saying they're not good lakes. They're overrated lakes compared to the other ones. So if you stay tuned tomorrow, I'm going to talk about what I think are the 3 most underrated lakes and why they are, and you can, sort of see what you think on that. But anyway, if you like the video, hit that like button, drop a comment. Every time you do that, it helps that algorithm on YouTube, helps get the videos out to more people. To really appreciate that. It really helps out here. And I'm going to get back to making some maps here for Fish the Moment, and we'll check in later. See y'all later.